Before I start this, I feel like I have to preface something, because I'm going to be saying some pretty critical things in this video, and I don't want to come off the wrong way. I love Borderlands, and when I say I love Borderlands, I mean I love it a lot. I've got pretty intense rose-colored glasses for it, so it stands to reason that I might have missed some pretty weird or off stuff about it. Liking a piece of media can really twist our perspective on it, especially in a cultural context that associates the media we consume with the kind of person we are. We can easily trick ourselves into thinking that a game or a film or a comic or whatever says whatever we think is good, because if it doesn't, what does that say about us? I think that thoughtful media criticism can be a great remedy to this distortion, forcing us to consider the content of the text against our perception of it. So, all of that being said, I'm not trying to say that these games are bad or evil. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with playing Borderlands or being a fan of Borderlands. I love these games, even if I'm being critical here. With that out of the way, let's ask the central questions of this video. Why are you treated like the hero in these games? Are you seriously the hero? And what does moral behavior even look like in this world? So what's the world like in Borderlands? Well, it's not in great shape. Beyond a few weak, scattered city-states, there isn't much government or polity to be found. Most power is held by large corporations that aren't exactly concerned with the quality of life that regular people have to deal with or how popular they are. Because of this, there is essentially no rule of law at all. For those who aren't strong enough to provide for themselves, there isn't much to hope for beyond a relatively painless end. Even for those who have the power to take and defend their keep, our common mortal nature and the lack of law leaves life to be solitary, nasty, brutish, and short. Thomas Hobbes, the guy who said that nasty, brutish, and short thing, was an Enlightenment-era political and moral philosopher who described the state of human beings without law or society as what he called a war of all against all. Everyone fighting everyone for everything, and no one to say otherwise whose word actually meant something. Hobbes thought this was bad, not startling or controversial, I think, and that it's in the best interest of everyone to stop this, leading to the first part of his form of natural law, that every man ought to endeavor peace as far as he has hope of obtaining it. And the rest of that sentence reads, and when he cannot obtain it, that he may seek and use all helps and advantages of war. So essentially, you should seek peace as much as you can, but you can defend yourself and you don't really need to hold back or anything. Keep these principles in mind as a model of moral behavior as we dive into what heroism looks like in the Borderlands world. With all of that knowledge, what would heroic behavior look like in the world of Borderlands from the initial position of the characters? I would argue that joining a community and avoiding war would be a pretty good first step. Going outside on raiding and scavenging missions would be dangerous and cause unnecessary conflict, so be self-reliant and stay within your own walls as much as possible. AKA, not what the characters do in the games. Sure, you join a community, but you join a community in the middle of a war, keep that war up, and take the raiding and fighting solution whenever possible. So, if state of nature thinking can't justify why the Vault Hunters are treated like heroism, is there a moral concept or theory out there that can? Skipping over all the moral theory for a brief aside, I want to address the fact that the obvious practical reason why players are treated like heroes is because Borderlands is meant to be a fun romp that doesn't really worry about the ethics of what you're doing so much as the enjoyment and the humor. But I think that's what makes analysis like this interesting. What we still don't do when we feel like we're let off the hook from ethics and morals can be seriously revealing. Borderlands clearly still has us valuing things like friendly NPCs. The characters value things and are acting reasonably from there. That's a very basic kind of ethics. Okay, I think there's something I've been stating as fact until now that I should give some support for. One could easily argue against my analysis that the Vault Hunters in Borderlands franchise aren't actually heroes, but merely protagonists. I think that the text shows that the characters the players are controlling are supposed to be the heroes. Take, for example, the first area and narrative section of the game. In the beginning of the game, players are pit against a big bad guy named Captain Flint. I hate to describe him as a big bad, but that's seriously how it's presented. Not only is it shown through dialogue and environmental storytelling that Flint abuses his underlings and has done horrible things to our new lovable robot friend, Claptrap, but just look at the way he's designed. He looks like a Saturday morning cartoon villain took a detour through Mad Max and decided to cover himself in blood before he showed up to work this morning. There is a clear good versus evil dichotomy being set up in the story between these swanky and good-natured heroes versus the evil, terrible bad guys from the very beginning of the game. And this continues throughout the whole playthrough. The bad guys only get nastier and nastier, while the heroes have dialogue and scenes that humanize them beyond just being allies. So, if the Vault Hunters are actually supposed to be heroes, maybe the ethics of self-defense could justify their actions. I'm going to be taking from a textbook I have called The Ethics of War and Peace by Helen Frowe. This book is huge and covers just about every facet of ethical debate around war, but for my purposes I'll only be using a few sections around self-defense. The idea of self-defense, that one is allowed to be violent in defense of their own life, is not a new or controversial one, and many would just accept it without much analysis. The reason I've cited Frowe's book specifically is her explanation of the domestic analogy. The domestic analogy is the idea that self-defense logic can be used to justify or explain war scaled up. This could pretty handily explain the hero's actions in Borderlands 2. The bandit groups in Hyperion are collectively threatened to violate the Crimson Raiders and the denizens of sanctuaries' rights to life. So, when the Vault Hunters go raiding and pillaging, it's justifiable as self-defense. Problem with this explanation of things. The Vault Hunters would be permitted to fight and kill, yes, but the kind of brutality and pleasure killings the Vault Hunters take part in are still hard to justify. Like, yes, you can kill someone who's trying to kill you, but goring them to a million little pieces for fun is extraneous, let's say. Okay, this is the part where I get critical and weighty. My ultimate conclusion is that there isn't really a moral theory that can explain convincingly that the Vault Hunters in Borderlands 2 are heroes. They aren't really heroes at all. The story just treats them like heroes. The reason it does this is so it can tell a compelling story. When the Vault Hunters are treated like heroes, the story gets to have lots of humanizing dialogue scenes and fun, lighthearted humor moments. It gets to care about the things that the Vault Hunters care about, and send the players off to kill their enemies with a clear conscience. This raises another question, however. If the Vault Hunters aren't really heroic, and the game needs to treat them as heroic, how does the game convince the players to treat them that way? How Borderlands does this, I'd argue, has a lot to do with tribalism and using various tricks to get the players to dehumanize the bandits as a whole other category of thing. I'm going to be drawing from Edward Said's Orientalism to get a little bit at some of how that happens. This book criticizes the weak assumptions that back European attitudes of superiority over people who they deemed Orientals, mostly everyone beyond Europeans. I don't mean to say that any of these groups are comparable to bandits, but I think some of the same logic behind how the Vault Hunters' treatment with bandits is justified exists here. Firstly, we tend to think of ourselves as superior to bandits. Think how the bandits are designed and depicted in Borderlands. Usually the clothes they wear are raggedy at least. They have crazy names. Their bases look right out of Mad Max. And all of their dialogue depicts them as capricious and dishonest at best and outright insane and idiotic at worst. What I'm getting at is that the game is making an attempt to paint bandits as categorically bad to justify what we do. Second is the idea that bandits are a clearly defined objective category which can be studied and known as different. Was there any part in Borderlands that made you question the division between a bandit and a non-bandit? Even when you pick a side in a bandit clan war, your allies are still very clearly bandits, not good-natured sanctuary denizens or anything like that. What I'm saying is that the game maintains that there is a clean slice between bandit and not bandit. This is in contrast to how people usually are, with countless overlapping categories that a given person fits into. It's the domination and mechanical otherness that bandits are subjected to by the narrative that are used as the justification for treating bandits like subhumans. In conclusion, Borderlands 2 treats its characters like heroes because it's convenient. The way that the story convinces you of this version of events is through an Orientalistic tribalism and othering that the narrative is not prepared to, nor wanting to examine or criticize within the text. The game could have questioned your assumption of what a bandit is and what you are, but it never wanted to.